About 10 minutes. Yeah, that's gnarly. Lucas, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Leroy.
So I guess just for the listeners, if you can explain what you do at First Home Specialists.
Okay, so essentially I guide clients from start to end through the process of buying a first home. Essentially, I'll give you an example from this morning. I was speaking to a lady who has just settled on a block and they've paid their deposit, and we were chatting through it, and she was excited yet completely scared at the same time. And she said to me on the phone, I don't know how people do it without someone. You know? So I guess in a roundabout way, it's kind of answering your question that
You're someone.
I'm someone. Yeah, I'm someone. Someone. I don't. Yeah. So she. But she's a good example of someone who probably would have just frozen from the overwhelming fear of taking that next step and actually taking action in doing something. Had she not had someone to kind of hold her hand and guide her through that process and explain why certain things were happening at certain points, what would be the next step, where that's going to go. I think left to her own devices, she would have just been too overwhelmed and just froze.
100%. And, people talk about fight and flight, like what people do under pressure. But I think the biggest thing people do is freeze. But they freeze forever. Like imagine if you had bought a house when you were 18 years old. If you had bought a house when you were 18 years old, where were you when you were 18?
I was on the Gold Coast.
Were you?
Nearly bought a house.
Did you?
Nearly bought a house. No,
Whereabouts?
Main Beach. Beach. Nearly bought an apartment. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't 18. I was 21. Mm-hmm. Nearly bought an apartment. Just kind of got distracted with being 21. Didn't buy the apartment, but the apartment was $180,000.
Yeah.
At that time.
And what were you buying? I
was buying a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment with an ocean view.
Yeah.
Just on the what you'd call beach side.
Mm-hmm.
So just for the beachfront road, and just on this side of the beachfront road with an ocean view through.
So yeah. I understand what you're saying. So just on the non-beach side of the beach road. That's very confusing. I get what you mean.
Beach side, not beachfront for the listener.
Yeah. Cool. So 180 grand.
180 grand.
What do you reckon that'd be worth now?
I know what it's worth because I can't help but terrorise myself by looking at it from time to time, but it's up over $1 million.
Yeah. It's bananas. So I remember when I was, maybe 25, and I had this job. So I had this job where I thought I was a corporate high flyer, right? I actually ran a call centre, but let's not let that get in the way. So, but it was a big job. Like I'm 25 years old. I'm managing 1,000 people.
Wow.
So we were subcontractors to Telstra, so obviously huge Australian company. So I was earning what I thought was just a ridiculous amount of money at the time. I look back now and realise that I was actually slave labour, but that's not that's not the point. Anyway, so got a little bit of money behind me, and I started looking at houses, and I was looking anywhere. I was living in Melbourne, and at the time there was a place in Melbourne called Point Cook, and Point Cook was like an urban fringe master plan development, one of the earlier proper master plan developments. And I remember saying to, it was like one of the admin girls who was there, I'm like, have a look at this. I think it was similar price, like maybe 180. It may even have been 180. Like you can get a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, massive backyard. And they just hooked into me and said, no way, you're not living there. And I listened to them, and I didn't buy anything. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I ended up buying my first home. But if I actually, 108. It doesn't matter. It was in the hundreds, whatever
it
it
was cheap.
worth. Yeah. That same thing now. Yeah, you're talking over $1 million.
Yeah.
And it's the fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
And the real problem is people do nothing.
Yeah. And I bet you the admin girl giving you the advice didn't own a home either.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point though, right?
From Bill at the barbecue who's never owned anything in his life.
All right, cool. So that's what you do for
Yeah, I don't know if that really kind of answers the question in the sense of what do we do? We essentially try and make buying a first home as simple, easy, and hopefully fun for people as possible.
Yeah.
And we do that from end to end by removing all the things that are going to probably become overwhelming for them to do it on their own throughout the process. And we put all that under one roof to make it easy for them.
Yeah.
I guess
Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, love it. It's great.
What do you like about it?
I like getting that phone call from, like, I'll use the same lady I was speaking to today as an example. I spoke to her a while back, let's say a month ago, and she rang me and she was completely disheartened with the idea of getting into her own home. She'd just spent 3 weeks going back and forth supplying documents to a mortgage broker to have them come back and go, "Nah, you're not going to be able to get into a home." And I said to her, "Well, let's just have a look at it. There's no harm in getting a second opinion." And we went through that process and had a look at all of her stuff, and it just wasn't the reality, because I think in a big part when people are being guided through that process or not guided through that process, they're not necessarily speaking to someone who specialises in the space of helping first home buyers get into a home. So we went through this process of just an initial, understanding of her situation. And by the end of that process, when I came back to her and said, "I think we can help you get into a home," she burst into tears on the phone.
Yeah.
Like, what do I like about doing this? It's like that's it, And now they're on their way. They'll be in a new home before Christmas. Like,
yeah.
Oh, goosebumps, Like,
yeah, it's good. It's it's super rewarding. I find the same thing. Like, sometimes it's a little bit like herding cats. As sort of people are going everywhere.
Yeah.
But once and it's fine, right? Like, people are nervous, so you expect that. But once you sort of get them in, you actually get them into the home. Like, some of the feedback that I've got from people is, for them, it's life-changing. I think you probably touched on a really good point there, and it's one of the big problems that I see first home buyers face is people tell them no, but no doesn't necessarily mean no. And it's one of like the catchphrases that I like to say is you need to stay positive and be determined. Because if you've got those two elements, you're kind of going to stop at nothing. And, what you were talking about that broker who said, "Oh, no, we can't help you." No, we can't help you doesn't necessarily mean no, you can't do it. In fact, a lot of the time what it means is, like, from that professional is kind of, "No, I can't be bothered." Yeah. And what it is, like, I get it from their point of view. So, when you're doing a first home buyer, you're doing someone who's low deposit. You're selling to, like, for the mortgage broker, they're doing a loan for someone who has no idea what they're doing. You're doing a niche loan. There's often a lot of grants available. There's often only a certain number of banks that you can go to for, like, first home loan deposit schemes, stuff like that. The last bit of it was you're also doing a house and land loan. And it's a super complex loan where if I'm doing a loan for someone who's owned 3 or 4 houses, I've got $1 million in equity, I'm earning 350 grand a year, you can write that loan with your eyes closed. Customer doesn't ask any questions, bank doesn't ask any questions, like, here you go, here's the money. And for mortgage brokers, like, that kind of thing, it is like, it's easier. So, although it's mean, like, you can't blame them for wanting to go that way. But, you know, that's kind of why we exist and why we do what we do is, you know, all we're specialising on is first home buyers. So we're experts in it.
Yeah.
You know, if we get people wanting to buy their second house, we often say no to them because this is our niche. And when you understand the niche, then you understand how to get people into the home. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat.
Yeah. It was like that client we were talking about from yesterday.
Which client?
The lady who rang me and she said, oh, look, I've already spoken to a broker and I've been told we're not eligible for any of the grants because of my income and because of this and because of that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I kind of had a little bit of a look at her situation, got a bit of a snapshot of her current situation. And the reality is it was the complete opposite. She was eligible for all the grants. Everything was accessible to her. But when an authority in a conversation says to you, that's not on the table, then there's no reason why you wouldn't take that on face value if someone was qualified, right?
100%. And like as a first home buyer, how are you to know the difference between a good broker and a not so good broker? Don't swear, Leigh.
Yeah. Well, just a specialised broker. Because when I bought my first property, I went through a broker that was a referral from a friend, and he specialised in investment property. Mm-hmm. And when we purchased through one of the institutions that we could have got the grant for the LMI waiver, didn't even bring it to us as an option, didn't get the grant, is what it is, but it was $30,000+ we missed out on that we were completely eligible for. Just because, like you were saying, like it wasn't his specialised niche, so it probably wasn't even on his radar and probably partly in the too hard CBF basket.
Yeah. Where was your first time?
Just here in Southport on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What did you buy?
We bought an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment just down by the water, looking down the main river. Mm-hmm. Middle of COVID, did the remigration from Victoria with all the other Victorians. We flew up in a flock. You can, I could tell you I'm from Victoria, but you'd be able to tell that by the pastiness of the skin complexion. So we bought there. It was good. It was a good apartment. Served its purpose. We were there for about 2 years, and then we wanted to buy a house, and so we put the apartment on the market and sold the apartment. Used the equity we'd made in that couple of years from the apartment to buy a family home.
Yeah. Good. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I mean, this is again, it's something we talk to a lot of clients about, is about leapfrogging into your dream home. So, you know, when you buy your first home, I think for everyone there's some sort of compromise. Like, you know, whether you're compromising on the area you want to live in, perhaps the size of the house, the size of the block. But the reality is, like, funds aren't unlimited. But the thing is, you have to get in, because you are never going to be able to save money at the same rate the property goes up in value. So with that apartment, for example, do you mind me asking how much you bought it for?
Yeah, no, we bought it for $575,000.
Yeah, and then how long did you hold on to it?
Oh, we had it for maybe 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 2 years.
What did you sell it for?
Just on 700.
Yeah. So let's just, for keeping the maths easy, you made 200 grand, 2 years?
Yep.
Mate, no way in the world you would have been able to save that amount of money.
No, absolutely not. And then we had obviously the bit of the deposit that we'd put into that as well. Mm-hmm. So we had a bit more, and then we went in, and then when we leapfrogged into the family home, we bought something that was about $990, I think.
Yeah, okay.
So like you're saying, there was no way that from a standing start, $990 was going to be the first marker. Mm-hmm. Without the leverage of the first one, we would never have gotten into the second one.
Nice. So what are some of the common problems that you see our clients come up against?
Probably first and foremost themselves is probably because, like we were talking about before, it's that fight or flight. You know, can this really happen? Is this a potential reality? and just getting that ball rolling on starting to go through the process and trust the process from that starting point. Once you start to get going a little bit and they start to see, the classic walk a mile, see a mile, once they touch and feel and see, wow, this is a potential reality, it becomes a little easier. But that initial stage of people just getting out of their own way and trusting that initial stage of the process, partly like I was saying from before, it can be tarnished by previous experience a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean previous experience?
Oh, where they've spoken with someone who's told them, no.
Yeah.
You're not you're not going to be able to get into the market. You don't have a big enough deposit. Classic roadblock.
Yeah.
I speak to people all the time and they're like, oh, look, we haven't got much deposit yet, but we're still, and they try and pitch their case, so to speak, but we're still saving and and it's like, it's all good. It's a common misconception, right? This idea that you have to have a certain amount of deposit to even have a conversation. And with all the benefits that are available currently to first home buyers, it's not the most relevant piece in the conversation.
Yeah. So, traditionally you kind of needed to save up a 20% deposit. And then obviously people started going lower. So you're like 10% deposit with LMI, but people think that it's all around deposit, right? Like if I've got this epic deposit, I can have any house that I want. And it's just not the way it works. Similarly, people think, if I haven't got a deposit, I can't get a house. But there's a few different elements to getting your loan approved. So one element the bank looks at is obviously your individual situation. And when a bank's looking at your individual situation, they're going to look at three things. So one is definitely deposit. So we call this deposit and costs. And that's essentially your savings. The other thing they're going to look at is they're going to look at your servicing, which is your income versus your expenses. And then the final thing they're going to look at is your credit history. And they do that mostly either via your credit file, or if you're doing gifted funds, something like that, they may look at your tenant history as well as proof of savings. Now, when you're going for a loan, if something's limiting you, it will be one of those three things. But you can only work on what's limiting you, right? So if you've got a borrowing capacity of, say, 600,000, for example's sake, so that's how much the bank says you can borrow, and then you've got 10% deposit, so you've got 60 grand in savings. And I'm just going to keep this really basic for this because there's a whole heap of fees and whatnot that goes into it, but we'll just keep it simple. So 600 grand borrowing capacity, 60 grand savings, not taking into account costs, you can afford to buy a $660,000 property. Now, if you chuff off and you go and save up another 10 grand, so now you've got 70,000 in savings. Well, it's 600,000 borrowing capacity plus 70 grand savings. So now you can buy a $670,000 property.
Yeah.
Right? Because the thing that's limiting you isn't deposit, it's servicing. So what you're far better off to do is go and get a part-time job, which may then boost your borrowings to like 700,000. Well, now you're looking at a 760,000 purchase. But people get very focused on the deposit like it's the be-all and end-all. And look, for some clients, it is a genuine hurdle that needs to be overcome. And there's ways to overcome it, right? Like you can, there's definitely government grants that you can go for. Some people like to shake down the bank of mum and dad. Do you know you can get into a house with a $0 deposit, provided you've got a guarantor.
Yep.
So there's options is really the point that I'm getting at. Anyway, we digress, my friend.
All good. It's all good stuff.
So what else do you hear from the people that you talk to?
Oh, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait for a bit. And it kind of comes back to your point of the deposit. Like, so you got 660 and then you save your extra 10,000. How long did it take you to save that extra 10,000 of after-tax dollars? Is it, 3 months, 6 months?
I don't know. Like, what's a Like, you think about it, what's a good saving rate? Like, if you were saving $200-300 a week out of your pay, it's
Yeah.
pretty good saving.
Yeah, great.
All right, so let's say it's $200 a week. Your partner's doing it as well. That's $400 a week. I think you're doing pretty well if you're doing that.
Yep.
It's 20 grand a year.
Yep.
So yeah, 6 months savings.
Yep. But that way back to what you're asking, if the pause is in the idea that I'm gonna just wait a bit, save a bit more deposit, see what the market does. In 12 months' time, will that $660,000 house I was sitting on the fence about pulling the trigger on be worth $680,000? Will I be able to save faster than that's going up? Am I getting am I getting left behind, or am I ahead of the game?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the fundamental principle of property investing, but it applies equally to buying your first home. Is you cannot save money at the same rate the property goes up in value. So if you've got a $600,000 property and a property goes up 20% in a year, which is a lot, right? Like, that's boom type growth. But that's what we were seeing a year or two ago. So if it goes up by 20%, that's 120 grand a year. It's over, like, it's 2,400 a week, I think. My maths might be. I think that's right.
Yep.
So that, like, I can't save that much money.
No.
But even if it went up at half that rate, so 10%, that's still 60 grand per year. That's $1,200 a week. Even if it went up by half that again, so 5%, which at the moment is pretty well the inflation rate. So if it's going up at 5%, that's still 30 grand in a year. It's the equivalent of $600 a week. Like, it's difficult to save money at the same rate the property goes up in value. So, you know, what a lot of people are doing when they wait is they're saying, oh, you know, we'll save up more deposit so we can get into our dream home or our ideal home. But the whole leapfrogging thing that we were talking about is you're much better off to buy what you can afford now when you can afford to buy it. So let's say the property you want's worth 800 grand, but you buy a 600 grand property now because that's what you can afford. Well, now you've got your $600,000 property that you live in, that you're paying the mortgage off, that you would have been paying rent anyway. So if you're going to pay off someone's mortgage, why not pay off your own? But then on top of that, you're saving money at the same time. So you're getting the benefit from the uplift in the property, plus you've got your savings on top of that. You know, you go 3, 4, 5 years down the track, maybe 2 years down the track, depends how the property market goes and how quick you save. You can then use that, like you did on your unit, which you got lucky on that unit, but like you did on that unit, to then buy, you know, your dream home or your family home.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. What surprised you about what you've seen coming into the job?
Well, aside from the obvious one we talked about before, the sense of fulfillment of really helping people do something that's potentially generationally changing without being over dramatic. You know,
What do you mean?
Well, I mean that some of the people getting into their first home have been renters their whole life. They might be, 35, 40, 45, whatever. There's no specific age demographic, but there's probably an average. Mm-hmm. And they've been renters their whole life. Their parents are renters. I've never asked about their parents, but I'd take a punt. And you're changing generational outcome for people. Like, they're going to own their own home. They're going to pass that home onto their kids. And it's going to change their whole family tree. Like, it's massive.
Yeah.
And they didn't think it was a possibility. Then they met us. Now it's a reality. It's I don't know where I was going with that, but it's I'm having a moment.
I don't know where I was going with it, but I know I like it.
Yeah, it's what surprises me. What surprised me, how
Like the impact that you have
Yeah.
on people's lives.
Yeah. Like you're 100% changing people's lives for the better in the immediate, helping them to do something that they may or may not have been able to eventually get to doing themselves, but they hadn't. Let's just say that.
Well, this is the thing, right? Like if your parents have never bought a home before, how do you learn about how to buy a home?
Right?
Yeah. Even if your parents do own their own home, when did they buy that home? Like most of them, 20.
1986.
Is that when your parents bought
Yeah,
their home?
1986. Yeah, 1986 in Ivanhoe Parade, Ivanhoe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
How much did they pay for it?
I think the first one was $18,000.
Yeah.
$18,000 in 1986.
Do you know how much it's worth now?
Oh, it's 100%. It's worth over $1 million.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a really amazing thing, property like that. But I think the point that I was going to get at there, so if you went to your folks, and let's just say that's the only house they'd bought, you went to them and said, what do I do to buy a property? Well, their information is literally from 1986. Yeah, where they're paid 18 grand. Like, how much would your parents have been earning then?
Well, Mum was a school teacher. I've actually asked the question because I was really interested in it for I'm not sure what reason, but she was a school teacher and she was making about $30,000 a year in 1986 as a school teacher, and Dad was an air traffic controller.
Was he?
Yeah, he was the head of approach control at Tullamarine Airport.
Was he really?
Yeah, yeah,
I never knew that.
yeah,
I wouldn't have picked that for your dad.
Yeah.
Like I've met your dad.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he
He's,
went on to teach air traffic control at the training centre in Melbourne.
He's about as bald as your brother used to be.
Yeah.
Might need to cut that bit out.
No, we'll snippet that and send it to him. Now he's got a hairline like, who's that guy? Who's that rapper? Anyway, he looks like a bit of a rapper now.
Yeah.
So he was an air traffic controller, and in that day and age, he was probably making close to probably $90,000 a year, which is a lot of money. But they're paid a lot of money. They're paid about $400,000 a day. Yeah, big money.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the two of them. So she was making $30,000 as a school teacher. He's making like $90,000 an air traffic controller.
And their first property was $18,000.
$18,000.
What?
Yeah.
Like 3 months' wage.
Right.
Just for the block of land or for the
No,
for the whole
house,
thing?
House and land.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, we need to save up a deposit. Yeah, let's just save this week's wage.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
So now, the average school teacher in 2024 makes about $75,000. So the salary's increased 1.5 times.
So 75,000, and if you were buying at the median house price in Brisbane, and it depends where you look, but your median house price is around the 800 mark. I've seen a couple of different numbers. One was 800, one was like 890, I think. So it's gone from being half a year's wage to now it's 10 or 11 times an annual wage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other way around is the house is 40 times more expensive and your wage went up 1.5 times.
Yeah. Yeah. So when, like, it really is difficult. Like, it is difficult. It's, no, I'm just repeating myself, but it's genuinely difficult. So, quite often generations carry on about other generations. When I was a kid, we used to be tough, blah, 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 blah. But when you look at this, there has never been a harder time to buy a home. But I actually think part of the problem is that people keep telling people how hard it is, right? It's genuinely hard. Stats like that prove it. Like, there's no taking away from that. It's hard, but it's not impossible. it's definitely possible to do, but you need to know how. And
Yeah.
there's ways to go about it. You know, whatever's holding you back, there is a way to overcome that.
Yeah.
So, you know, whether we're talking about like deposits holding me back. All right, cool. What grants are available for you? Income's holding me back. All right, well, is there someone you could buy with who's got a good income? Like, it's not straightforward, and it's definitely more difficult, but it's possible.
Yeah.
But the issue is, like, if you went to your parents and said, how do I buy a house? They would tell you to do what they did, which is save up a 20% deposit. But you're going to be at that for the next 10 years.
And they're only doing it for 10 weeks.
Mate, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gnarly. If you were to give advice to first home buyers, what would it be?
Just do it. Just do it. Like you, to your point, from a standing start of no deposit, you know, there's no harm in having a conversation. Conversations don't cost money. Mm-hmm. You know, have a conversation with an expert, because the reality is, from a standing start, like you were saying, limited deposit, okay, there's a $30,000 first homeowners grant available. On a $600,000 property, that's a 5% deposit. Now I don't have a 20% deposit. Well, there's another grant available that will guarantor your lack of deposit, so you don't pay the mortgage insurance. Now you're the equivalent of someone who had a 20% deposit. Now we're into the conversation of, do you have a decent job? But you're standing there going, well, I don't have deposit, so, you know, there's no point really looking into it, because somebody, Bob at the barbecue, told you need a 20% deposit. Bob doesn't own a home. Why are you listening to Bob?
I don't know why I find Bob so funny.
It was either Bob or Johnny Bananas.
Cool. What were some of the emotions that you went through when you bought your first house?
Excitement, fear, doubt, satisfaction.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was in that order.
When you first walked in to a home that you owned for the very first time, where you would have been with your family, I'm guessing.
Yep. It was loud.
For those of you who don't know, Lucas decided to breed often. No, so Luke, you've got 3 kids.
3 kids.
Yeah. How old are they?
6, 4, and 2.
Yeah, right. Busy house.
Call it
your
a
house.
batch. Batched them all together.
A clan.
Yeah.
So when you were the first time you walked in your front door, tell me how it went down.
Well, we walked in. They went bananas, you know, running around, doing what small humans do. And yeah, it was just that overwhelming sense of, yeah, it was quite emotional. Like, it's quite overwhelming, the reality of like, oh, this is ours. Like, it's ours, not a, oh, let me just send an email and see whether or not I can put a picture up. Yeah. Oh, let me just find out where we're allowed to put the TV. Just that kind of blank canvas of, this is our family home. What memories are we going to create first from here? You know, and from putting a triple bunk in one of the rooms with a slide down it so the kids could launch and literally put a hole in the wall off the slide, and you don't have to report it to anyone.
Yeah.
It's your hole, your wall.
Yeah, right. Your wife reports it to you for fixing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to need to patch that up. I'll need a YouTube video.
Yeah, sure, I can do that, babe. Click.
Airtasker. Does somebody know how to do that? Yeah, it's a real sense of achievement. Like, the fact that you're at that starting point at one point where you're gathering all this information and starting this process right through to this point where you're walking in the door, kids are going bananas, the whole bit's happening, and it's like, we did it.
Yeah, we did it. Yeah. That's a bit, yeah. I connect with that. So I remember not the first home I bought. So my journey into home ownership was via investment properties. So I bought a couple of investments and then used that to leverage into my first home. So the first home I bought was up here, actually. So it was out at Helensvale. right on the border of Hope Island. So I called it Hope Island, but it's not. It's Ellen. Yeah, so I remember I got the keys, and I was actually overseas when settlement happened. So I came back and I picked up the keys. I just picked them up from the receptionist at the real estate, and it was a bit of a it was a non-event. I got
anticlimactic.
Yeah, anticlimactic. Yeah. So I got the box, and the box had champagne in it, and I don't drink, and I'm like, what am I going to do with that?
Spray the receptionist.
But then I drove out to this house, and I walked in the front door, and the house that I got, it was a 2-story house, way too big for a single bloke. But I walked in, and there was like a void, so you go in the entrance, and then there's the stairs that go up, and it's just like a 2-story hole. And I remember just looking around, and I was by myself, and I just started laughing. I'm like, I can't believe they gave this to me. Like if they knew who I was, there's no way they would let me have my own house. And it was just in disbelief. And like, I remember I walked into each room, and I just stood there and I looked around, and I'm like, it's mine.
Yeah.
Like, it's all mine. That feeling, if you haven't experienced that feeling, it's hard to describe, right? And that feeling is what, it's what, the whole reason we got the business, the whole reason that I've written the book, we make money, we all make a living out of it, of course. But that feeling is what we create for people. And that's what makes this joint magic.
Yeah.
That's why when you come in here, well, I hope when people come in here, it's just fun.
Yep.
We just laugh all day, and there's ups and downs, and we ride the roller coaster with our clients, but that feeling is what it's all about. It's really rewarding. It's really rewarding. Gives me the warm and fuzzies.
Warm and fuzzies. I love it.
Yeah. Anything else to add?
Probably ready for lunch.
Probably ready for lunch. We can do some lunch. All right. Perfect. Let's wrap this thing up.
Wrap it up, big boy.
Lucas McKenna, it's been a pleasure.
Over and out, Leigh, my boy.
Okay.